I'm more into Irish folk music.
Okay, cool. Thanks everyone for coming. We are at the second Fireside Conversation. We've got Behan with us, who's the Managing Director for Specialized Bicycles in Africa. And I add the bicycles because I've spoken to a few people this week who didn't know what Specialized was, so thought I'd just add that in. So Bobby, maybe you can start by just giving us a little bit of background, you know, how long have you been coming to South Africa and stealing our woman and, you know, marrying into the family and stuff like that? What did that journey look like for you?
She's right there, so sorry guys. So I'm from Ireland, as you probably guessed. You know, that's a 3, but also this is the number 3. You get the accent. So I grew up in rural Ireland. I'm a farmer's son. I'm the eldest of 6 boys. And yeah, from a young age, I mean, had a first summer job at the age of 12. So, and growing up on a farm, always working. But I fell in love with the sport of swimming early on in my life. I was a swimmer and always had this passion for cycling. I'll try and jump around a bit, but giving you a bit of the, you know, the sport background. Back in the 80s, if you Google it, Ireland in competitive road cycling was at the top in the world. Sean Kelly was the king of the classics, if any of you know the history of cycling, where he won all of the big classics. And then Stephen Roche won the Tour de France, the Giro d'Italia, and the World Championships in the same year. And then we had 2 others, Paul Kimmage and Martin Early, who aren't even known, but Martin Early had the yellow jersey in the Tour for a number of years. So I ended up, even though I came from rural Ireland, where it's a lot about Gaelic football, and you get into the traditional sport, particularly in a little rural community, I somehow got pulled into these other sports. But I had this fascination with cycling. It was only when I went to university in Bedford in England to study sports science, where I was connected to somebody who said, you should be doing triathlon. So effectively, my goal was to go to the Olympic Games as a triathlete representing Ireland. I always wanted to go to the Olympics. It didn't happen, but I was kind of on the Olympic cycle and part of the Olympic thing. I was, I suppose, very realistic about my level. I knew I'd make up the numbers and maybe not feature at the front. So your career opportunities came my way in that journey. But so basically I was a triathlete, university in England, and studies finished in '97, and then I said I'm going to pursue triathlon seriously. And not easy, because you're trying to scrape together money and do odd jobs and do various things around it to sustain yourself, because it's not like a sport where you make a great deal of money, particularly at the level I was at. But effectively I was a top amateur in the US. I ended up going to America. Funny, in Ireland, a local was home for a funeral. In Ireland, funerals, people gather. Funerals is just it's like it's Irish culture. That you should not. It also can end up being a party if it's not too sad a funeral. We have those funerals in Ireland, but. Yeah, effectively a guy was home from Boston for a local neighbour's funeral. My dad met him at the funeral and he said, look, Bobby, how's Bobby doing? He's pursuing this triathlon thing. He'd love to go race in America. And he's like, you can come and stay with me in Boston. So I ended up going to Boston and summering in Boston. And it was during that second summer in Boston that I read about a triathlete from Stellenbosch, Conrad Stolz. And I also read how some of the top British triathletes in the world were coming to this town called Stellenbosch to train. So at the end of the season, I went to the World Championships in Montreal, Canada, and tried to track down Conrad and couldn't. Then finally at the after race party, well, not the after race party, in Burger King at like 3 a.m. after many pints, I saw a girl in a South African top, Rowena Kerr, who ended up being a great South African triathlete. I went up to her and said, I'm looking for Conrad Stolz, you know where he is. And she said, that's him with the Tintin haircut at the bar or at the counter ordering his burger. So I went up and said, look, I've heard great things about Stellenbosch. You know, what's it like? There's no internet back then. There's no, like, you can't quickly Google Stellenbosch. So anyway, in any case, he said, it's awesome. You should think about it. And that was it. We spoke for a minute, 2 minutes, if that. So anyway, I went back to Boston, and there's so many stories I can tell, so I don't know how much time I have, but I went back to Boston, and now I'm going, right, I don't have the money. How am I going to go there? How do I figure this out? My season's over. So through the summer, I'd been doing kind of like, I had this job where it was an Irish-American company called the Gentle Giant Moving Company, furniture removals, where I worked 20 hours a week. They paid me double hours, and I could just hang out in the yard and work in the yard, just cleaning up. They gave me like easy work. But basically, I went back to Boston. I worked 70 hours a week properly removing furniture. And then at night, I worked as a doorman in an Irish pub and effectively worked my hut off, as you would say. And at the end of 7 weeks, I had $6,500 saved. Ticket to South Africa.
So a doorman's like a bouncer, right?
Yeah, exactly. Doorman, yeah, bouncer,
Nice.
yeah. Just, you know, show me your ideas, they do in America. Went back to Ireland on my way, told my parents I'm going to South Africa. They said, do you know anybody there? I said, no, I do, yeah, I've got friends there. I knew nobody. Landed in Cape Town airport, found a taxi, had the big bike boxes that you pulled on 4 wheels. It looked like a coffin. It literally did look at the old bike boxes. Taxi driver drove me to Stellenbosch, said, where are you going? I said, I don't really know, a local hotel maybe? And he took me to Java Cafe, where it didn't exist. It was a gravel car park. So there, went into the Stellenbosch Hotel, met the receptionist, and I said, look, I'll probably stay here tonight. Can you look after my bicycle? She said, no problem. I said, where's the swimming pool? She pointed me in the direction of Kutzenberg. Now I'm looking around going, frick, there's mountains here. I was expecting it to be flat and this beauty. And I'll never forget walking up the lawn, going, this is the most beautiful place I've ever been. I'm in love with, I want to end up here. And that was within a few hours of landing. This is heaven. So anyway, I got to the swimming pool. Do you know Big Francois the masseuse? Big Francois Retief, redhead.
Yeah, for EPT.
Yeah, EPT.
Yeah.
Big Francois met me. He was working at the reception. And this, I'm telling you this story because you're going to see now about crossroads in life and who you meet and the different intersections in life. Big Francois met me at reception. I said, look, I'm an Irish athlete. I'm looking for a place to stay. And he's like, okay, let me phone around. So I sat there for 2 hours. He said, I know a woman has got a house. He got hold of the woman. The woman said, there's 2 athletes renting the house, but I can't get hold of them because they're out training probably. So I waited, and eventually the woman called and said, no, you can, the guy said you can come and stay. It's a 4-bedroom house, so you can come and stay. They didn't know me at all. So anyway, this woman who ended up being Rihanna Rabi, do you know Rihanna Rabi? And Lud Rabi, so Lud the doctor. Daughter Marie, then she was 13 years of age. She ended up going to the Olympics in triathlon, and they became dear friends, the Rabi family. She picked me up in her combi, drove me to the hotel. I thanked the lady for looking after my bike and said, sorry, I found my friends. And basically rocked up at the house. And the house is basically the little bridge. It's on the corner of the lawn. So I ended up living on the lawn. It's the little bridge in front of the athletics track. There's a house in the corner there, so on the lawn. Went to the front door, and Christoph Sauser met me at the front door. I said, how you doing? I'm Bobby. He said, no, I'm Christoph. I said, good to meet you. I knew nothing about mountain biking. I'm a triathlete, and he probably knew nothing about triathlon. It was before he was famous, but we became best friends. So basically, I summered here and fell in love with the country. The following summer, I got headhunted by Oakley through a university friend, once again at Crossroads, through triathlon and university. He had been working for Oakley, and they were looking for somebody in Ireland, and he said, I have the perfect guy for you, but he's in South Africa training for the Olympics. Anyway, this guy with Oakley in Ireland contacted me, and I was realistic, and I was running out of money. I couldn't figure out how I'm going to fund this Olympic pursuit. I was running low on funds. It was the end of the summer here. It was March 2001, and I basically took the job at Oakley. So I went back to Ireland and worked for the eyewear brand Oakley. I mean, if you can sell Oakley's in Ireland, you can sell anything. So then I did that for 4 years. In the last of those 4 years, I kind of regretted maybe giving up the Olympics and said, I think I have it in me again. I started racing and winning all the events in Ireland and said, I'm going back at this again. And I missed South Africa. I ended up living with South Africans in Ireland. That's how badly I miss South Africa. So effectively, back to South Africa, raced the world circuit from being based here. and you always happy out. And then a year in, Christoph and I now are best friends. A year in, well, he'd been talking to me a bit about, he was then a Cannondale rider and how he'd been headhunted, or he'd been identified, or how do I say, Specialized wanted to sign him. And I was like, man, Susie, you've always been a Cannondale rider. I mean, now you're going to go on Specialized. It's going to be a bit strange, yada, yada, yada. But in any case, he made the decision he's going to sign for Specialized. And he signed for Specialized. And then in about April, so once again at the end of the summer in South Africa, similar to the Oakley time, I was now back in Ireland, starting to race in the Northern Hemisphere. About April, he called me. And he said to me, I said to him, what's wrong with you? You sound depressed. He said, I thought his mum had died. And he said, no, our team manager's just resigned. And I'm like, Susie, you scared me. I thought your mum had died. Like, seriously, you've got no problems in life if that's your bloody worry. So in any case, he said, no, you're right. It's not a big deal, but the team's a bit of a mess. You know, the team manager's not working out, and, you know, it wasn't the way he wanted it to be. And I said to him, Susie, there must be 1,000 people in the world for that job. I mean, surely you know somebody. And he said, yeah, I've got an idea. I said, who is it? Because if I know them, I can give you some advice. He says, it's you. They're going to call you in 15 minutes. You take this bloody job. So I'm like, but Susie, I'm a triathlete. I know nothing about mountain biking. And that's basically, I ended up running the worldwide race team from Ireland. So basically the cross-country race team. And
so who would have been the riders at that time?
The riders at that time were Susie, or Christoph Says, we all call him Susie. It was a guy called Liam Colleen, big talent from England. Struggled when he was, how do I say, biggest talent that couldn't wear the #1 board on his bike. The pressure got to him. Alban Licata, Sabina Spitz, who ended up being the Olympic champion in 2008. Then I was Chris Powell on downhill, Carl Strait, the freeride rider, Annika Beerton. Probably know Annika from 4-cross downhill, and I kind of helped out a little bit with the triathletes. So yeah, I managed the team then, and about a year in, I was doing the job from Ireland, and I'm going, but man, I can live anywhere with this job. And here I am in Ireland. I said, I'm just packing up, I'm moving back to South Africa. So basically I came back to Stellenbosch and start running the race team from here. And that's kind of how I ended up here. And then 2009, I was introduced to my wife. That's a whole other story. But I've been coming to South Africa for a decade, from 1999 to 2009, before I met Christine. And yeah, like I've always, I know there's a lot maybe of negativity or negative sentiment in the country. And a lot of people think there's grass is always greener on the other side and things are better. The reason the grass is greener, I say to people, is there's more shit in it. You know, every country's got its problems. Ireland's got a really hard climate, so it really depends on your perspective. But look, life's good here. I know there's tough things here, and there's things that aren't easy, but it's a great country. I think it's the best place in the world. That's my take on South Africa.
Okay.
So sorry, is that?
That's great. Thanks for the background, Robbie. Okay, so the next question.
Yeah.
Starts with 2 quotes,
Okay.
but it starts with a question, and then I'm going to finish with the same question.
Sounds
so the
like a
question
riddle.
is, do you consider yourself a visionary? Here's the context. In a 2010 conversation with what I imagine would have been a magazine at that time, you were quoted as saying that, this is 2010, in 5 years' time, I may be settled and married. I would like to still be working for Specialized. So that, I think, went quite well. And then the second one says, in 2013, you were interviewed by a full-size newspaper. I think that's right. That would be a website now.
Yeah.
Espousing the values of a cross-country course in Stellenbosch. As we all know, 2018, that came to fruition with a very well-documented sprint finish between Nino and Sam Gaze.
Yeah.
So bearing that in mind, and with the work you do here, and the lovely tour you've just given us, do you consider yourself a visionary?
I'm not one to put myself in the limelight, but yeah, I'm always thinking like thinking out there. Yeah, so I'd always try to be thinking into the future and trying to imagine where things are in the future. At the moment I find I'm on that treadmill at the office a bit, and where I'm at my best if I can step back from that. Like today, for example, I just bought a sup, and I jumped on the sup and I rode 1,000 laps of the dam here, but that's where I'm. So yeah, I would say yes.
That's awesome. Okay, so in line to that, what do we need to make Stellenbosch a more cycling-friendly town?
I think there's a lot of people, so let's start with the good. There's a lot of people doing a good job in terms of the different communities pulling in the right way, and I think the culture of cycling is very strong. I think on the mountain bike side, let's talk to mountain bike now. I mean, the Stellenbosch Trail Fund and the late Richard de Villiers and now Ernst House and team are doing a great job. I've been volunteering in Jonkershoek since actually 2009, so a long time ago. I think one of the challenges South Africa has, and a friend of mine, Corey Muller, who's the dentist in town, I sometimes found it hard to get my head around it, because Ireland's a little bit different in that way around community, but sometimes I find that this is mine now. This is my, you know, and the kind of like the fence things. He says it probably goes back to the four trackers. This is my piece of land, and this is my piece of land. Where Ireland, it's more like this is us. How do we, you know? So I think, and I think it's happening now. Is all these bodies unifying with common vision, and that includes municipality and the various stakeholders. Stellenbosch, I said it to somebody at the university once, she didn't appreciate it, and neither did the people at the municipality, but Stellenbosch is like this perfect jewel, but it's a bit rough. It's like, Stellenbosch is like Usain Bolt, but it doesn't train. So it's got all the potential, but it doesn't work at it. It's like this jewel that needs to be smoothed. So I think there needs to be a bigger picture. I think to position the town as a global destination, so it needs a strategic plan. How are we going to position Stellenbosch like we position Zermatt for skiing? What's the fundamental plan? So that's the first thing. I think, not to be negative, but I think road cycling has got it's probably the most dangerous sport you can do in this country. I think I think the country needs laws around road behaviour. I don't know when it'll come, but you have to be very careful on road bikes. So that's one worry I have. That's a threat. I think that's an obstacle. So attracting the global people coming here is something that, like when I came here, the top triathletes were coming here. They don't come anymore. And a lot of that is attributed to that. And other areas like Mallorca and so on, south of Spain, they better positions themselves. So I think a strategic plan for the town is key, and all the stakeholders need to be part of it. I think people are doing it, but I don't think enough of it is happening. Infrastructure is another one. I think the trail infrastructure is off the charts. What's happening on the trail side, I don't think we've any problems. One of the best in the world. But the road infrastructure and the ability to commute by bicycle and get around by bicycle, it's perfect for that. I mean, if they can do it in Dublin, you know, people are commuting to work, they can do it anywhere, because the weather in Ireland is, take the worst day here in the winter and times it by 7 months, and that's your winter. You know, the challenge here, you know, the winter people say the weather's bad. I said the good thing here is, you know, you're guaranteed a summer. My perspective is the weather's crap, but you don't know if you're guaranteed a summer. You know you're guaranteed a winter, but you don't know if you're guaranteed a dry summer. So the one thing I'd say about South Africans too is every South African should live in a cock climate, because a lot don't appreciate the weather. You know, if it's a bit windy or a bit, the weather's crap, and I'm like, you know, try the west of Ireland and you'll be fine. You'll never complain about the weather again. Or try Boston and the snow. So I always say that South Africans should experience a bad climate, because a lot of people who haven't left Stellenbosch actually don't appreciate how good it is, because they don't have that reference point. But it's a great place. So yeah, I think I mean, I'm jumping around, but I think a strategic plan is required. But the opportunities there, I also think there's a huge opportunity with these athletes coming here, like Nino Shooter, for example, is a rock star and he's a gentleman. But people like that can be better leveraged. And I think they'd be up for that. You know, if you were to go to them and say, okay, Nino, Pauline Provant, I'm trying to think of others.
Lars as well.
Yeah, Lars Foster,
Simon Andreasen
Sauser,
as well.
Simon Andreas, and Sam Gaze comes. I mean, Tom Pitcock's been here.
You got Mauro Schmidt this week.
Yeah, Sabina Spitz lives in George. I mean, and not just those athletes, there's other sports people coming here. And we used to have Linford Christie walking around town with his top off, looking ripped. He's an Olympic champion from track and field. And obviously there's a lot of rugby and so on, but just getting a lot of those, there's the Hungarian swim team coming here, nobody really knows about it. But pulling that in, I also think the political thing, you know, the whole thing of race, I mean, that to me is an obstacle. I think there's a lot of people caught up in that politics, so they lose track of the big picture. I mean, and I had it, I mean, I'm jumping around now, but I had it with the university where, and I'm not afraid to be, I'm very, it's called Irish, I'll just say it as it is. I mean, where somebody at the university, I was challenging them on the fact that Flora Duffy, actually probably the best example, the best athlete that's ever come to Stellenbosch, Flora Duffy is having problems training at the swimming pool. Like, she's literally having problems being able to train at the facility. And I phoned one of the heads of the university and I just said, this is bullshit. I didn't say it like that, but she said to me, you're Europeans coming here. There was a bit of a racial connotation. And I said to her, you know what? I don't have much time, but let me start with Irish history. Not all Europeans are colonialists. In fact, the Irish were colonized. And I gave her a bit of history about the 300 years of oppression in Ireland. And then I said, well, let me, maybe I can just jump to the Polish now and the Nazis and what happened. And then I said, you can't bland every white person with that. No, and I had a proper, but I think there's a lot of people like on that story still, and it must be forgotten about. Like, the Irish aren't complaining about the English. We get on with it. And that I think needs to be solved, because there's a lot of that impacting stuff with the sports facilities. Like, the swimming pools aren't being leveraged. They've got a 50-meter swimming pool there in Stellenbosch that's empty half the time, and you've arguably got the best swim coach in town coaching at the Caucus pool in town at Bloomoff.
No worry, I'll sort
you
them
know
out.
that you know, but that
We'll
so
get there.
that type of thing, getting the bodies to buy in, and kind of think bigger picture than the local issues. You know.
So I'm going to start the next section off with a story, and then I'm going to segue into a question. So Simon, who's here, and his brother and two other mates did a cycle tour on the east coast of Australia recently, where they did 430 Ks from Port Macquarie to Wollongong to watch the World Championships road race. And obviously, as we know, Remco Evenepoel, riding a Specialized bike, is now the world champion. And 6 of the last 8 road race world titles have been won on Specialized road bikes. We don't see much of that in the local marketing. Now, I know that you've just mentioned how dangerous a sport road cycling can be in South Africa, but in terms of accessing the local market, does South Africa fall in line with global trends, or does it sort of stand alone as an enclave on its own?
Okay, so first of all, on the marketing side, so let's say we buy product here, we sell it, there's a profit, we send that profit to Specialized Global, and that money then is utilized to engineer, develop the product, market the product, and so on. So, for example, well, we're a small market here, so let's say we paid for the sidewall of the tires that he was running, but we basically were spending a lot of money on race teams. So we don't double up here locally, because we can leverage him locally, if that makes sense. So we don't have a race team here per se. So on the marketing side, we deal more with local ambassadors who are relevant and doing good things in the community. Vicky van der Merwe, she's got 300 members of her triathlon squad. She's got group rides going out, and so on and so forth. So we're helping trail builders. So it's less about, except maybe for Matt Beers and the thing we managed to put together with Toyota, it's more about, how do I say, more on the ground ambassadors as opposed to I won a local race per se, you know, because we have that happening internationally. So why double up on it? I would say on the road side, the business here is about 14% plus minus of the totality of the business. So I would say global trending, I would say we're more skewed to mountain here than in other markets. For obvious reasons, mountain bike here has just been such a success story as well. And although events like the Cape Town Cycle Tour are very popular with a lot of people taking part, those people don't change. The old bike that's sitting in the back of the garage gets brushed off and taken out. You know, there's a lot of that. So that's maybe the first thing. Trending wise, I would say we're always maybe a little bit behind in certain things. But then in other things, South Africa is setting trends. I think in the marathon stage race side, South Africa has set the trend. They are the trendsetters. You are the trendsetters, no doubt about it. Best marathon stage races in the world, and I don't think any other countries really recreated that. The gravel space, which to me is the big evolving space in road cycling, because it's a road bike. A lot of people may say it's a mountain bike, but it's actually a road bike. But that's coming here quickly, but it's not. It hasn't come as quickly as in the other markets. We're a bit behind in inventory, so we haven't realised the opportunity, if I'm being honest. But we're probably a little bit behind, but not that far behind. It's happening, but not at the same rate as the marathon stage races. The other thing that's probably been slow here, attributed to the marathon stage race allure or appetite, has been trail riding. Trail riding's happening, it's kind of happening, but not happening at the same rate. That's the most popular form of mountain biking globally. But here, it's coming. I'll give you a good analogy of that. We had an e-bike launch, a global e-bike launch here in 2019, just before COVID hit, where we invited 25 of the world's media here to position the Levo SL. I was here on the farm, in fact. That kind of also planted the seed for the office here. But in any case, we went to ride Jonkershoek, and one of the American engineers said to me, "Bobby, 2 questions, man, 2 questions. What's the story with all this Lycra? And why are all these people so underbiked?" And effectively what he was saying, he was seeing all these people in Lycra on cross-country bikes on trails that were proper trail bike suited. Does that make sense? And that was his analogy, because they were worried about having the event here. It's the launch of an e-bike. It's the launch of a trail e-bike. Will the trails be up to what we need? And they trusted me. I said, "Guys, I can promise you, you're not going to be disappointed with the trails." But they had labeled South Africa as very cross-country marathon, and they were worried, and they obviously didn't need to be worried. The journalist said it's the best launch they'd ever been on in their history, many of the journalists. But so I would say in some ways we're ahead of trend, but I don't think marathon stage racing will be a trend globally, if I'm being honest. And in other ways we're maybe a little bit behind trend, so it does depend. One thing that's interesting with trending at the moment is how young riders are riding. Young riders are riding more progressively. They're growing up on bicycles, so they're far more skilled. I checked my son, 9 years of age, and how he's riding. I mean, he's been exposed to a bicycle since he's that high. I didn't have that. But how those kids are riding is just, they're going to demand different to what we want now. In 10, 15 years' time, the sport will evolve, because they will evolve it.
Cool. Okay, so we've had 1 or 2 people submit questions beforehand, and one of the questions that came out that said, "Why do you think specialized bicycles maintain their second-hand value so well?" And there were some suggestions given as well, so it's quite interesting. So, is it the after-sales service? Is it the cultish following of the people who ride specialized? Or is it because the new bike is overpriced? So when it's second-hand, the price is about right.
Yeah, sure. Okay, so I think part of it is we're very specific about the channel of distribution. We've got these brand stores that you know, and I think I said earlier, find somebody who's already solved your problem and learn from that. We set up these brand stores, and we did it in a premium way, so that we also want the brand stores to be sustainable. We're not in the discount chains, the big discounters. We've chosen not to go that route because you need to be making money. You need to pay your people well. You need to look after your people. You need to create the right environment. You need to make sure your retailers are making money so they can pay their people well. We really try to look after our people. And even with this office, we could have just set the office up in some old school, like a lot of the importers do in this country, some warehouse somewhere. And we try to do it right. With that, you don't get the bicycles on discount as much as some of the other. There's some brands where if you pay full retail, you're being foolish because you can get it at such a. Whereas our stuff, you pay the full price, which means the resale value is going to be higher. So you pay less probably, but then in terms of the overall pricing structure, I think we're pretty competitive with it's pretty similar. If you go S-Works with the XX1, the Eagle drivetrain and the Axis, it's much of a muchness unless bikes are discounted. An interesting one is Bike Addict in Malmesbury is an interesting model. Massively low overhead. Malmesbury, which is obviously a very inexpensive place to be, low cost of people, you can just undercut everybody.
And they're working on volume, right?
And volume, and you ship it all over the country. But to me, it's more about building the brand, so in a sustainable way. So I think the service, we always try to do well with the service. I don't think we always get it right, if I'm being honest, but I think at the stores we really try to set a high standard. I do worry. I look at the price of bicycles now, and it's concerning for me when I see how high it's getting, and the exchange rate is definitely not helping. The supply chain issues we've had and the cost of shipping has not helped. Our kind of profitability from a percentage wise is very similar to what it always was, but just the headwinds are a bit harder to navigate. But I always say also people generally focus on the S-Works. It's like if you're into cars, you go to Mercedes, BMW or Audi, and you're looking at the RS or the M-powered cars or the AMG cars. It's not necessary to have the S-Works bicycles. Some of the lower level bicycles are so good, and they're as good as the S-Works was a couple of years ago, if not better. But I think we've done a good job of separating S-Works out, and in some ways too good of a job, because when people see the price, they focus on the S-Works and forget about the other. But I would say overpriced, it's kind of like, it's all relative. I mean, it's expensive on the high end, but then you can also spend new 70,000, which is still a lot of money, on a full suspension, lower end bike that's still a great bicycle, 1x12 drivetrain, full carbon build. Not carbon wheels, but you know where I'm going. So it's weighing at 11 kilos, so I just think this S-Works thing probably doesn't help. The one thing maybe on that, it's not to try and give you a sales pitch, but this is two things I say to people. Number one, you all know a Toyota Land Cruiser. Toyota Land Cruiser can do 1 million kilos, and then you maybe change the oil. We all know it's the king of Africa. How much kilos do you think Janelle de Villiers' race car engine can do? So it's a Land Cruiser engine. How many kilos before he throws it out?
30,000.
Anybody else?
I'm thinking a lot less.
10,000 kilos.
There we go.
So people come and say, my freaking Porsche costs less to service than the car, than the bicycle. And I said, do you track your Porsche? When's the last time you took it to the track? No, I don't track my Porsche. I'm like, but the thing's on the public road, it's not being pushed. The challenge, and if you look at a Porsche or a Land Cruiser, let's say a Porsche, they weigh anywhere from 1,400 kilos up. You weigh 80, 100 kilos. The challenge with a bicycle in this market, particularly a mountain bike, is the bicycle weighs, if it's a non-e-bike, weighs 9, 10, 11 kilos. You weigh 80 to 100 kilos. You're 10 times the weight of the bike. You're sending it down Armageddon in Yonkers. The stresses. You're basically putting that bike through a lot of strain, and the motorbike or the race car that you take in the Dakar is not the thing you buy off the floor. It's a heavily modded. What we're selling is basically a bike you can do the Cape Epic on or abuse it down the mountain. So I think that's one of the challenges we have, is you've got this very simple design, i.e. a bicycle, but if you think of the stresses and strain that it goes through, and I think that's what makes the bicycles expensive, because of you're dealing with these small parts that are put through a lot of abuse, particularly on the mountain. The roadside is a harder one to argue because the bike, it doesn't have the same strain, you know. But the mountain bikes, the abuse they take is. But yeah, I do worry though about the pricing. Do I think it's overpriced? It's how much you want to spend. Do I think a Ferrari's overpriced? If you're into cars, maybe not. If you know, it's all relative, you know.
So thanks for that, Bobby. Before we move on to some more South African specific questions, I just want to check if anyone has a follow-up question around maybe the way Specialized does its business or interacts globally, or how the South African market might be different to the international market. Otherwise, we're going to go straight into some more South African specific questions. Bobby, are you ready?
Yeah.
Good.
I'll try and keep it shorter if that's, I don't know.
There we go.
We're
doing well.
Okay.
We're doing well. Okay, so in a hypothetical situation, if you had the same budget as SA Rugby, 749 million rand a year,
Jesus, that's that much.
what would you do? And in the course of one World Cup cycle, so 4 years, or one Olympic cycle, what results do you think South Africa could achieve?
So you're on about racing?
So we're talking anything to do with bikes?
But to race at the highest level?
So we're saying SA Rugby spends 750 million rand a year and they win the World Cup.
Yeah.
Cool.
I'm just getting my calculator out.
Now we're saying, if you take that money and you run Cycling South Africa, how many world champs, Olympic medals, World Cup wins, both mountain bike, road, triathlon, do you think?
So that's $40 million a year, which is more than the budget. So I ran global sports marketing for 7 years, so it was more than the budget of our global sports marketing. So all the Pro Tour teams, all the mountain bike teams and so on. So 4 years is going to be difficult.
So I'm just looking at, if you take the talent that we have, if you backed it well financially and ran it well, what could we achieve as a country, do you think?
I don't think it'll be done in 4 years. I'll tell you why. The top riders don't just fall out of the sky. You have to be so talented, and to identify that talent at a young age, you have to identify that talent early. I think infrastructure, first of all. I don't think the trails here are steep enough or technical enough for. You hear a lot when people go overseas and race, how steep and how technical it is. So that would be a first thing, the infrastructure. Greg Minnaar is an interesting one because he is South African, but you must remember his first World Cup was in '97 here in Stellenbosch as a junior, and he evolved with downhill. He's been in the scene so long that as the courses progressed, he progressed with it. He didn't just drop in and start downhill. He went through the whole evolution of the sport. So he didn't have that baptism of fire that some of the kids have now, where they go to Europe and you think they're going to fly, and the next thing the reality kicks in. So I think you'd have to have I think the infrastructure, first of all, trails. You have to invest a fortune in trails all over the country. If it's about racing, events, you need a very strong local race team, and you need to have the international racers when they're here racing. So you need to make sure that the international racers are coming here and doing some of the events. So I think what the Cape Epic has done, you need to do that in the traditional World Cup formats. And obviously, you need very well orchestrated teams. You need bases in Europe, where people are going to Europe. It feels like home. It's like a home away from home, and they're in the trenches in Europe. On the roadside, you need to be taking kids 16, 17 years of age and dropping them into Belgium in the right environment. the thing I'd say is you can't give it too much of a red carpet, because the best road racers particularly are as tough as nails. You have to want it. You have to be able to fight through the cobbles in Belgium in the spring when the weather's crap and it's cold and it's, you know, and you can get great talents, but the question is, do they also have the mind to push through those hard days? Because we look at the Tour de France, it's very glamorous. You're climbing Alpe d'Huez, and so on, and then the weather's nice, but you forget about the classics and how hard it is, and that's where a lot of the riders have done their time. I think performance testing, analytics, and so on. The thing I'd say is you can't make it too easy either. There's some riders, like obviously Alan Hatterley, invest in Alan. You'd have Greg come in as some type of mentorship role. I would have Greg Menard definitely involved. I would steer clear of politics too. The whole political thing, I think, would also have to be a side. I know it's in rugby, but yeah, you'd also have to steer clear of that and just pick the best riders. But
So give us a number.
how much it would take?
No. What are we looking for? Olympic medals? World champs?
No, you have to always think you have to think you want to produce the best. So
Yeah.
you have to think world champions and Olympic champions, but it won't be in 4 years unless it's Alan or Greg.
Yeah. So give it, what do you give it, 15 years?
Yeah, it needs to be a 8 to 12 year cycle.
And then what are we looking at? And then
What do you mean, money wise?
No, we're looking at numbers. How many medals, how many world champs?
Oh, jeez, that's so hard to know. I don't know. I genuinely, it's like.
Because you know what South Africans want to hear? They want to hear South Africans are amazing athletes. If we had the right infrastructure, we'd be beating people.
Yeah, look, for
day
sure.
in, day out.
For sure. I mean, the thing is, South Africans are big people. Mountain bikers are small people. Like.
What?
You know, yeah, I don't think it's that simple. But I will say South Africa's lost a great amount of talent. I'll give you some examples. Simon Lessing, the guy I came to train with back in the day, the triathlete. He was a British. If you Google him, you'll see British triathlete born in South Africa. Jan Frodeno, one of my closest friends. If you follow triathlon, Jan was Olympic champion in Beijing, and he's won 5 Ironman world titles, 3 full distance, 2 half Ironman. He was born in Germany, moved here when he was 8 because they were giving away the passports, and his parents, you know, before apartheid fell, they were giving the passports to anybody that would come before the whole regime fell. He came here, he grew up as a beach surf lifesaver in Landudno, and only went to Germany when he was in 2003. He could have been a South African Olympic champion. So I think one of the things going for here is the climate. So I don't know how many, but there's no doubt, if I think of the interest in cycling here and how it's a mainstream sport, which is not the case in a place like Ireland, it's a minority sport, it's a mainstream sport here, I think public interest would be high. So I would like to think it could be very successful.
Awesome.
And you're the same time zone as Europe. Big challenge for Australia and New Zealand. Big challenge for South America. Same time zone is huge. It's huge. Overnight flight, you're in Europe. But it has to be out of Europe.
So, sort of building on that question, just a small follow-up question on that. Lately, in global cycling, we've seen non-traditional small countries come to the fore. Slovenia, Denmark, even countries like Eritrea are producing Grand Tour stage-winning performers. And I mean, Eritrea is about as big as Stellenbosch. And a place like Slovenia is 200 k's across, yet they've got, 6 Grand Tours in the last 4 years. 5 in the last 4 years.
Yeah.
So is there a lesson that we can learn from that? Or is it a little bit more complicated than that?
The one thing I'd say about the Eastern Europeans, forget Denmark for a second, they're bloody tough. Those Eastern Europeans are hard, really hard. And it reminds me of Sean Kelly in the 80s in Ireland. He grew up in tough Ireland. You had a choice. You either work in the farm for the rest of your life, doing crap work, or he's going to go and race a bike. It's like a no-brainer. I'm going to go race the bike. And you're competing against that type of mindset. So those lads are hard. Yaroslav Kalavi, they're hard. The Russians are hard. Like, I just look at this Russian-Ukrainian war now. They're hard people, both sides. And I'm not saying South Africans aren't hard, but those Eastern Europeans, they come from that Eastern Soviet bloc, that they're hard. So that's the first thing. I'd say with Denmark, there's always been a history of cycling. I mean, a bad example, Behan and so on, and Rolf Sorensen and so on. I mean, there is a history of. I mean, Behan won the Tour de France. Yes, he was high in everything, but he won the Tour in a period where everybody was high in everything. So he still, you know,
he was the best doper.
He was the best doper, and he was as high as a kite. But Rolf Sorensen, they've had success, and I'm trying. There's other names. Eritrea is an interesting one, and I think it's an incredible story. But from what I hear, and I don't know enough about it, there's quite a lot of money being pumped in there, and there seems to be quite a culture of cycling in Eritrea, which is amazing. I've never been there, don't know much about it, but there seems to be this culture of road cycling, and I do think that there's been definite development work from Europe into Eritrea. It hasn't just happened with Eritrea on its own. There's been an interest in Eritrea. I think Doug Ryder has had a part to play.
Yeah, and a lot of guys through to Quebec from there as well.
Big time. And he's, for some reason, out of Eritrea. I do think the black, like, I mean, if you've got I've got a kid, he's a good sprinter, but I'm like, white kid sprinting, forget about it. The black kid's always going to come through. There's only a couple of white people who've got, it's genetics. And I think, I'm interested, black, if you look at the Kenyans, and their VO2 max and their lung capacity and their cardiovascular systems and so on, it's interesting what they could be capable of on the bicycle. And I think the explosiveness of the big black South Africans, some of the biggest people I've met are the black Americans, but you must remember where they came from. They were hand-picked slaves from back in the day. They picked the biggest, the strongest blacks out of Africa, and they created a super race in America. If you look at those basketball players and American footballers, thank God they don't play rugby, because you've got these giants, absolute giants who are explosive and so on. So the black cyclists, in terms of sprinting ability too, they've got that fast twitch muscle fibers. They have to be super explosive. Just look at Michael Jordan jump. They've got that. So I'm amazed at more. I think more black riders are going to come through from Africa. I do, if the right things are put in place. I think gravel riding's interesting.
We got world champs in Rwanda 2025.
Oh yeah,
if I'm not mistaken. I think that's a big push for the UCI to get that going as well.
So it's inevitable that it will happen.
Okay, we're focusing a little bit closer to home now. Can you, let me rephrase that, when will you make it happen that Alan Hathley and Matt Beers win the Cape Epic together as an all-South African pairing?
I mean, I tried in Andorra this year. No, I'm joking, but I did speak. I know Alan well. We went through, our factory team went through a tough time about 2 years ago with leadership. And Alan wasn't happy, and it was a pity, because now he would still be on the brand, but he wanted a change. He took his change. His contract was up this year. I had a good chat with him in Andorra and said, look, Alan, it'd be great. I'm very open. It'd be great to have you back. But I think his structure there is really good, and it's working. So the question is, why change it? And I agree with him. He's got a good coach in there. His mechanics with him. It's working. He's the lead rider. So I don't think Alan will be on and he's done now a multi-year deal. And I said to Alan, and look, I'm very open and honest with you now. I said to Alan, you need to play the game now. You've got this crossroads in your life. You specialise, or maybe you want to be on Specialized, but negotiate now to drive the price up wherever you go, because you only get a couple of those crossroads in life, and this is a key one for you, my friend. We sat in Andorra and had a cappuccino, just the two of us, and I was obviously love to see him back on Specialized, but more so I'm happy for him to see him doing so well. He's a good kid, he's a good guy. Was it sad to see him go? I was, but I could also understand why. I kind of kicked myself because I wasn't that involved now. Maybe could have got involved, but it's not my job anymore. It used to be my job, but I think we're on the right track now. We've got the right leader. We're building it. We're building the team, because I think a lot of you may remember our team from a decade ago with Bury and so on. We were very strong, and everybody wanted to be on the team. And I think we lost our way for a few years. I think Alan it's on us actually. But I think we're on the right track now. Brilliant structure, brilliant team in place. But it's going to take a couple of years to rebuild it. So Alan and Matt on Specialized in the Cape Epic. It's not going to be for the next 3 or 4 years, because Alan's signed, and Matt is signed for the next 2 years. So yeah, it's not going to happen in the near future.
Okay, so we'll be holding thumbs.
Yeah.
Okay, so you
There'll
mentioned...
probably be a next rider actually.
Yeah?
Yeah. I don't know who, but
You want to take a punt on someone?
I don't know. I don't know who I don't know much about the young talent coming through.
Or some suggestions from the audience. Tristan, Marco, who else? Who else doing good stuff locally? JP?
Tristan is doing well.
Yeah. Tristan's on your factory team, eh?
Yeah, Tristan. I mean, Tristan, he's good. He's got some things to work on. I think it's going to be a younger rider we don't know about now. I think there's a big star coming.
Okay.
I just look at Bury Stander, and I always use Bury as my benchmark, even to Alan. Bury to me is the benchmark, and to me I think there'll be another talent like that. Well, he's the greatest talent we've had.
So that actually segues nicely into my next question. How good do you think he would have been? I mean, he was fourth.
Poor Nino would have
Olympics, right?
Fifth. Nino would have had a problem, and that was a bad year for Bury. 11 and 12, I think, were tough years for Bury. He was involved in bike shops and he had other distractions. Bury's greatest performance to me was in 2009. He was 21, and the elite riders don't like hearing this, and Tom Pidcock has kind of done that now, but he was 21. He was still a U23. He attacked. So back then, Absalon wasn't at the top. When Absalon attacked with maybe 3-4 laps in, that was the end of the race. He was gone. And he was whatever he was ahead. Bury rode across, bridged across, because back then the U23 riders raced in the senior race. They weren't separated. And that's the problem, part of the problem why you're not seeing U20, at least my opinion, why you're not seeing U23 riders coming through, because they're in the small pond. As Christoph Sauser says, they're in the baby pond for too long, and then they go into the big fish pond and they're like, geez, that's a shock to the system. Back then, the U23s were racing within the race. So they still got awarded the best U23 result, but they raced with the seniors. So Bury was mixing with the seniors the guys here used to complain when he was 15 that he used to race up age groups. He used to complain because it's not fair. There's fucking kids coming up and beating us and making us look like fools. Honestly, at 15, he was beating the 18-year-olds. In any case, he rode across and beat Absalon, the Olympic champion. And that to me was his greatest performance. So that's how good he was. He won a World Cup at 21 as a U23. The last rider to do that, I believe, I don't know if Pidcock did it, he could have done it. But if Pidcock didn't do it, the last rider to do that was Miguel Martinez back before 2000. There's the stat for you. Just to give you context of how good he was. So to me, Bury Stander would have been a thorn in Nino's side. And he was a big talent, and he had his head on his shoulders. That was the other thing. And he was the whole package.
So a slight segue now, and this might be a more difficult question to answer, but we've had this discussion before that cycling and I think mountain biking is quite a male-dominated sport.
Correct, without a doubt it is.
And Specialized has done quite a lot of work. I mean, you see it in the results at the Cape Epic, having won multiple years in a row.
Yeah.
Why do other brands not support female riders as well as Specialized do?
I don't think it's other brands per se, I think it's the female riders. And what I mean by that is there are many female riders and factory teams on the World Cup circuit who have complained about equal prize money and so on and so forth, but when push comes to shove, they don't come and pitch up at the Cape Epic, but they're quick to complain. There are many riders in the World Cup circuit on various brands, Trek, Canyon, all the other brands, not just, and some have taken, but there's not enough depth. So I point a finger to the women and say they should actually come and take part. and they're all worried about the impact it has on the World Cup season. That's the worry. But I don't think it's per se that. I think the brands too should be harder with those women to say it's a prerequisite that you pitch up and do the Cape Epic. So to me, the field of the World Cup women is maybe smaller than the men's for sure, but it's not as if you compare the men's field at the Cape Epic here and the women's field at the Cape Epic, it definitely doesn't represent the men's and women's field at the World Cup. So I think the brands are supporting women's cycling. The women aren't coming. So I think it's more the women must come than the brands.
Okay. Okay, we've got some quick fire questions.
Okay.
You don't need to explain your answer, you just pick one. Okay, cats or dogs?
Dogs.
Road or mountain bike?
Mountain now. Road in Ireland.
Pineapple on pizza, yes or no?
Pizza.
Pineapple on pizza, yes or no?
Yeah.
Okay, a braai or
Yeah.
Irish stew?
Right.
Correct, no? Well done. Crunchy or smooth peanut butter?
Crunchy.
EDM or rock music?
Sorry? EDM. What's EDM?
I think that maybe gives you your
Rock music. I don't even know what EDM is.
Comedy or horror movie?
Comedy. Hate
Night owl or morning person?
Morning.
Land Cruiser or Hilux?
Land Cruiser.
Wine or beer?
Beer.
Good man. Okay. Thanks, Bobby. Do you guys have any questions? Anyone in the audience? Okay. We've had one question come through earlier that asks, is it more difficult to sell bicycles in South Africa? Because I think we've all gone through that exercise where you go online and you check this bike that I want to buy costs £2,000, which should be like 40 grand.
Yeah.
And then you walk into the shop here and it costs 55.
Yeah.
Is that a South African thing, or is that just where we're located in the world, or is that the way the government sets up the way we do business?
No, I think the pricing, a lot of people compare it to the US. The US pricing is without the sales tax and so on. That has to be factored in, and the VAT has to be factored in. Our pricing here should be on par because we benchmark the US and Europe, particularly the US. I think though one of the challenges is 100,000 rand or 5,000 euros psychologically. 100,000 rand is a bigger number. I think the earning parity is different. So the monetary amount psychologically is different, even though they can be the same. The one thing I will say in South Africa, and it speaks to, South Africa's got the highest Gini coefficient in the world, which is a measure of inequality. We sell so much high-end product as a ratio versus the other parts of the world. Which, and also if you're here in Stellenbosch, maybe it's a bubble, it's a bad example. Or you go up to Joburg, the amount of fancy cars you see here and so on. Go home to Ireland and everybody's in a normal car. You don't see the deviation, so to speak. It's a bit more even, and I would say there are also entrepreneurial opportunities here. There's more opportunity here, but because in Europe they've figured out the structure so well that they kind of keep you in your box. So, but definitely there seems to be people here who seem to be able to buy high-end, whether it's raining or shining or the economy's up or down or sideways or in or out, as a ratio, as an overall ratio. The S-Works here, it just amazes me sometimes how well it does. One thing I'd say that my challenge here is that the bucket of product we sell is too narrow. Our business should diversify. So the Epic platform, if it gets the flu, then we've got the flu. Whereas in another market, they sell commuter bikes, they sell, a broader section of road bikes. Like we can barely sell a Lay here, which is our entry-level road bike, a beautiful alloy bike. It's a fantastic bike. People don't buy it. In Europe, they fly through a Lay, and so I think there's also more people using a bicycle as a tool for transport and so on, where here it's more of an enthusiast. So I think one of our challenges here is the diversity of the business. It's a bit too, thank God for e-bikes here, particularly my e-mountain. If that hadn't come along, I think the business would be very different to what it is today.
Awesome. Cool. Thanks. I don't think there's any other questions from the audience. Hey, there's one at the back, JP.
Do you see gravel racing taking over the marathon scene in South Africa in the next 10 years?
No. No, I don't. The marathon thing is so strong and so well set up. I think gravel's going to grow, for sure. But I don't, if I think of what the Cape Epic is, and let's use that as the benchmark, the Cape Epic is the pinnacle marathon stage race in the world. Do I see a gravel event bettering the Cape Epic on level? I don't think so. I don't think so. But it will grow. I think one of the challenges is we still got pockets of gravel. Like if you live here, where do you ride gravel really? In Stellenbosch. So and some of the roads are parts of the country very corrugated. You know, so yes, I think it's going to grow, and I think it's going to be I think it is definitely going to grow, but I think with all the trails that are happening everywhere, I think marathon stage racing is safe. I think the biggest threat for marathon stage racing is the younger riders riding differently, and maybe being into more progressive trail riding. Because one thing I noticed at Sani to see, because the gravel rider and the marathon rider are quite similar, you know. But one thing I noticed at Sani is that it's getting grayer. They're getting older. Where are the young riders? How are they riding? I think they're going to ride a bit differently, you know. But that's the gravel events here are hard, too. You know, 160 miles, 100 miles, 160k, 100 miles and stuff. It's hard. So you have to be really fit to do them. You have to be. Whereas I think if they narrow it down, it'll help. Like 30 or 40k events and so on. The moment it seems like you want to ride all night or do these crazy, you know, a lot of it is crazy events, which makes it very extreme.
Cool. On the note of gravel, what's up with the new hard virtues?
The STR.
Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I looked at it at the shop and I read the forums, and the forums obviously are very mixed in terms of. Yeah, go ahead, Phil. It's very mixed in terms of the style and so on and so forth. I actually quite like the look of it. Just not to say because I got my Specialized hat on. I went to the shop and had a good look at it. I was actually nicely surprised at how light it was. I've been sort of advocating for a bike like that for a while, because I think the gravel roads are quite corrugated here, you know, like if you go up to a place like Kimberley or Bloemfontein in certain parts, it's quite rough. So I actually think it's going to open up gravel to more riders, because particularly as you get older too, it's hard on the back. If you're on, let alone a hardtail mountain bike, you're on a gravel bike now with 42mm tires, it's quite hard in the body, no matter what compliance is in the seat post. So I actually like it, I really do.
Like the same evolution as what, for instance, mountain biking is getting more aggressive and thicker tires and almost overlapping.
That's one of the.
Like in 10 years' time compared to a hardtail you got 5 years ago.
Correct. It is definitely like when you start to talk about a 650B wheel with a a 47mm tire. You know, you're getting into like what a mountain bike was. That to me is a bit grey. You know, what's nice for me and what I like, I miss road riding. You said road or mountain. I miss my road riding back in Ireland. So I've got a road bike here that hits the roads when I go home to Ireland every summer. I love one thing I miss about Ireland. One of the things I miss is the Irish roads. But the idea of being on a road bike with your hoods and so on will always be very different to a mountain bike. So that feeling of being on a road bike in that position, if you're a roadie, it feels lacquer. It just feels good. So I'm quite excited about this Diverge STR, because if I was living in Georgia somewhere, please I'd be on that bike all the time, because now you can ride on roads where it's safer and you don't have the back ripped to hell. You know, your back, you get older, your back, it's hard in the back. Now you've got a bike that's a bit more compliant. So for me personally, I like it. I think maybe the hardcore racers, they'll probably, like Matt Beers and stuff, will stick with the crux and the hardship. But for somebody like me, which is a bit over that, I like the idea of it. But yeah, it's an interesting design. It's worth checking it out. It's an interesting design. It's quite light. I was surprised at the.
What's the weight in that?
It's about 400 grams heavier than the equivalent. The frame is 400 grams heavier than the Diverge. It's the normal, but I can't tell you. It's probably going to be in the below 9 kilos. You know, it'll feel like a road bike. Yeah.
Did I miss anything important?
No, I don't think so. I can give you a good Bury Sanders story if you want.
Love it.
You know, just to talk about Bury for a second.
And then we're gonna wrap up after that.
Then we'll, yeah. So I was running the race teams in. It just shows where his head was at. I was running the race teams in 2008, and I spoke with Jakob Fulixen, Nino Shooter, and Bury Sanders. They were the three riders I was thinking of signing. You know, Jakob had won U23 Worlds, and the year before, 2007, Nino won 2008. So I had spoke with, it was before U23 Worlds, and Bury went to Andorra, the Andorra World Cup, and finished second to Sauser as a 21-year-old. So that was another crazy performance as this young rider. And you must remember, Alan hasn't won a World Cup yet. Just I'm not comparing them, but just to give you the perspective. But in any case, I realised Bury's the rider we want to sign. So he did the Cape Epic that year with Sauser. I hadn't made my decision on that, and that was when they rode, when Bury was a GT rider and Sauser was on Specialized, and we created the Songo charity. You know, that was the only way they could ride in the same gear. But after Andorra, when he got second, I was like, no, we have to sign the kid. I always called him the kid. So anyway, at the end of the year, towards the end of the year, August, I phoned his dad, Charles, and said, Charles, you know, I just want to speak to you about Bury's contract. Like, Bury's a kid. He's 20 years of age. Yeah, he's born in '87, so I was he hadn't turned 21 yet. He was still 20. Because his birthday is the 16th of September. So I'm like, Charles, I want to speak to you about Bury's contract. You know, he said, no, Bury handles that. Bury, okay, Bury. And I was doing a lot of the contracts with all the athletes, and this wanted an agent, and this wanted this one, and this one. Phoned Bury, and I said, so Bury, I just want to speak to you about your contract, right? These are the terms, Okay, no, okay, I'll figure it out, Bury. Is that going to be tough? I'll figure it out, okay. And by the way, at the end, Todd Wells comes with me. I'm not coming if Todd Wells doesn't come with me. The shame, I told this story in his funeral, but he basically insisted that Todd Wells, his teammate from GT, came with him to Specialized. I'll never forget that, where a rider wanted his best friend with him, and in fairness, Todd Wells came and was a very
and
good...
potentially jeopardising his own contract by making these demands.
Correct. And Todd Wells came, ended up being a great rider for the team, great vibe in the team, but that's just a little Bury story. But he knew exactly what he wanted. He knew what he wanted in his contract. He was very clear about his intentions from a very young age. And that sort of mindset's required for that next champion. It's obviously about their ability, but also about their tenacity. And that's just an interesting Bury story.
That's awesome, Bobby. Thank you very much.
That's a pleasure. Thank you for coming. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, we're going to wrap up now. We're going to end off the live stream. There'll be some info coming out later this week about what we're planning for November and the road forward. But Bobby, thank you very much for your time. Thank you for a lovely venue. It's amazing. It's been really easy to set up. You've been very accommodating. Thank you very much. And for the tens of people watching at home, thank you for tuning in. It's been amazing. Thank you very much. And yeah, let's have a beer and something to eat, and then we can end off the night. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Phil.
Cheers, mate.
Thank you. Thank you very much.